Hey, what's up, everybody? Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of YFP Planning's fee-only certified financial planners. Before we jump into today's question, I want to give a shout out to YFP Planning's incredible team that makes this segment possible. YFP Planning offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. So whether you want to optimize your investing plan, pay off student loans, or simply build a solid financial plan, YFP Planning will help get your income working for you rather than the other way around. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from Michelle in Walkerton, Indiana.
Hi, this is Michelle Lyle from Walkerton, Indiana, and I was wondering about what to do next. I'm fully participating in 401k and my income is too high for a Roth. So what's your next best bet for investing any money that you have extra? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for submitting your question to be featured on this week's Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. Tim Baker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and I would say first and foremost, congratulations, Michelle, to get to a point where you're, fully maximizing your 401k. I think that's a great accomplishment to be celebrated. It is that question of I've always framed it as these are Baker's buckets. So Baker's buckets meaning what is the order in which I contribute to the different accounts that I have available to me, and typically it's, hey, make sure you're getting the match in your retirement plan, from there, because there's typically a lot of expense and kind of not great transparency in terms of the expense in the retirement plan. Go and look at an IRA, max out the IRA and then go back to the 401k and then, max that out. And then from there, it's kind of like a little bit of a choose your own adventure. So really the avenues here, because of, the income being too high for the Roth IRA, there's a few things that you can do. One is you can kind of, this is where I go back, it depends. You can kind of take stock, Tim, of what is the ultimate goal that you're trying to achieve, with these dollars. So is it retirement? So that's kind of back it up a little bit. So if you feel good and you feel like you're on track to retire at a reasonable age or whatever the age you've targeted, then maybe the things to do are not necessarily related to what a traditional answer to this question would be. And I'm going to go through the traditional answer, but as an example, you might say hey, I want to invest in a, kind of an Airbnb or a mountain house or something like that. And I want to do that in the next 10 years. You could use a brokerage account to do that. Or you could say, hey, I do want to really focus this more on retirement, but instead of retiring at 60, I want to retire at 55. And we know, or a lot of us knows, that a lot of these IRAs and 401ks, for us to be able to access those dollars, in most cases, you have to be 59 and a half. There's rules you can get around that. So that means for people that are retiring at 55, you need to have a pot of money available to you that you can access without taking the 10% penalty to kind of fund that early retirement. And that might be a taxable or a brokerage account, which is an investment account like an IRA or a 401k, but you don't get the tax benefits of that. So it could be that. So I think it's one of those things that, you want to step back and look at. I mean, it could also be, Tim, if you have kids, it's, maybe do it more in the 529. If you have other real estate aspirations, you could direct money that way. But, outside of that, if you're kind of taking more of a traditional approach, probably doing a contribution into a traditional IRA. So you'd be making a non-deductible IRA contribution with the hopes of that's just a place to queue up funds to then do a backdoor conversion. And again, I've said it multiple times, Tim, that I'm not a big proponent of talking about backdoors, because I think it's often very much overlooked and glazed over of this is, you put money in an account and then you have it sit there and then you move it over. It's not that. So there are things like the aggregation rule, which looks at all of the monies that you have in your traditional, your rollover, your SEP, your simple, and then taking all of that money together and then determining what you're going to move to the back for a backdoor contribution, then determines the tax. So it's not just as simple as, okay, I put $6,000 this year and then I, let it sit for a little bit and then move it over. So it's much more complicated. So, and then you have to figure out things like, what is your AGI this year? When did you make the contribution? When are you going to do the conversion? And then considering all these, the aggravation rule and really the step doctrine rule, which is, this is a rule that, if two steps of a conversion are completed within too short of a period of time, the IRS might determine that they're really one transaction and not allow it. And nobody really knows what the IRS considers too short of a period of time, which is frustrating. So I've heard a month, I've heard a year. So it's really kind of navigating those things. So, and I think the other thing to consider with the non-deductible IRA, so when you make a non-deductible IRA contribution, Tim, it often goes in to the same pot of money where you, maybe when you were a resident or when you were working earlier in life, you've made deductible IRA contributions. So it's really hard sometimes to keep track of your contributions. And then that can sometimes lead for you to pay more tax than you're worth. So the idea of, kind of tracking your basis, and a lot of this is tracked on when you file your taxes, if you're doing them correctly, Form 8606. Each year you make after-tax contributions to a non-deductible IRA. It's recorded there, and then that allows you to kind of keep track of what your basis is in that account. But that's easier said than done. So to me, at the end of the day, I would say really try to figure out what your goal is. The fact that you've got, you're maxing out your 401k, and then assess, kind of where you want to go in the fork in the road here. And if it's for retirement, then I would say, yeah, definitely look at a non-deductible IRA and look to, figure out how to do the backdoor conversion. But if not, it might be like, again, a taxable account. It could be something, a little bit different, like education or real estate. But these are the conversations I think that, you can't make this in a silo. So I think you have to overlay, again, what does the balance sheet look like? What are the goals? And then, execute from there. But sometimes, in this part of the plan, Tim, it can be more technical than people make it seem. Yeah. And it's just really important to identify that, because, there are, tax and penalty implications that are part of this.
It's great perspective, Tim. I think the knee-jerk answer to this, which may not be a wrong answer, but the knee-jerk answer, when someone says, hey, my income's too high for Roth, is backdoor Roth, right? And it might be the play, and it is for many pharmacists, but really taking that step back to say, where are we trying to go? What are we trying to do? What's the purpose? What's the goal? Where are we at in terms of that trajectory and that horizon? What else is going on? And then from there, evaluating options, one of which may be a backdoor Roth. And I'm glad to hear you emphasize, I think some of the nuances that get overlooked. It kind of reminds me of, we talk with a lot of folks about public service loan forgiveness, right? And I think one of the benefits of more and more information we've done and others have done on this topic is that the knowledge and awareness on it is certainly grown, but there's a lot of nuances in PSLF and optimization associated with public service loan forgiveness that might get overlooked in a DIY approach, especially similar to here, if you're looking at that piece, in that case, student loans in a silo and not considering how it might interface with the investing or the tax plan as well. So similarly, as we look at, backdoor Roth IRAs, and we've got a couple pieces of content on that we'll link to in the show notes from both the blog and the podcast. But I think a great place to interface with the expertise that we have at YFP Planning with the CFPs. And again, the technical aspect, one part, but perhaps even more important is looking at what's the overall direction, what's the purpose, and how does this fit in with the overall goals that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's one of those things, again, like, and I think it's sometimes surprising. Like, you ask that question, it's like, oh, well, I didn't really think about like actually breaking it down of why to put the money into a back door. It's almost like sometimes we're programmed. It's just like, well, that's the next thing to do. And it's like, well, let's actually, hit pause, take a breath and talk through this. And again, that might very well be the answer for this particular, for you, Michelle. But at the end of the day, like, I think before you go down that path, it's really to assess where you're at and say, okay, what's the next best move?
So for folks, whether it's, like Michelle, where perhaps you're getting it to maxing out some more of those traditional accounts, employer accounts like a 401k, 403b, looking at what might be next, or even for those that are on the very beginning of that investing journey and looking at, okay, I've got all these options out there. How does this fit in with the rest of the financial plan? We'd love to have a chance to talk with you further to determine if the planning services that are offered by the team at YFP Planning are a good fit for you and your plan. You can learn more and book a free discovery call at yfpplanning.com. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. If we feature your question on the show, we'll send you a super comfy YFP t-shirt. You can submit your question by sending an email to info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com, or you can record your question by visiting yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask YFP. If you don't feel comfortable sharing your name on the show, you can send or record your question anonymously. As we conclude this week's Ask a YFP CFP episode, an important reminder that the content in this podcast is provided to you for your informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on this show. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of Your Financial Pharmacist, unless otherwise noted, and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you for your support of the podcast and have a great rest of your week.